Hello everybody, welcome back to Hearthstone Grandmasters here for the Asia Pacific region. This is the first match of the day in che0nsu versus che0nsu. And even though these players have had a little bit of a different road to get here, they've ended up in the same place in terms of archetypes, with Warrior, Demon Hunter, Druid, and Highlander Hunter as the decks of choice for both of these players.
True and not. And we are still seeing, despite the changes in the meta, the mutual warrior bans. Nothing too surprising here. I was thinking that coming into this week, the only other class that you might potentially ban is priest if it's being brought, but that's not even a
Mm-hmm.
huge factor in APAC, so it looks like people are just going to be defaulting to warrior bans. And we are going to be leading up with the Highlander Hunter mirror, which is one of the less common mirrors we get to see over here, but I do think that che0nsu has been one of the earliest proponents of this deck.
Yeah, he's got a slightly interesting build compared to some of the other players. He's been a big proponent of secrets in the Highlander Hunter, despite most people wanting to go with cutting that out and instead having it maybe a little bit more early game, like we see from Rivius with the Worgen Infiltrator and Beaming Sidekick in there, or maybe just a little bit more mid-game punch, like some of the other players have gone for. The other part is, of course, that it makes your Scavenger's Ingenuity that little bit less consistent if you're taking out the Zixor and the Diving Griffin. And I can see actually looking at the list for che0nsu. Oh no, sorry, he is running the Zixor as well. But it just means you have one more beast thrown in there with the Phase Stalker that makes it a bit less consistent.
Decks are 20 cards.
Mm-hmm.
Is that che0nsu has an acidic compose where che0nsu has kill command. And both of
Ah.
those I could see as being relevant in the matchup. Who's going to first remove Stormhammer or Desert Spear being a very important one to gain board control early on, but kill command also for that extra bit of burst can close out the game, because towards the mid game, if one player runs away with it, I think that it quickly becomes a safe game.
And one of the things I kind of came to the conclusion to with this deck overall while testing a bit more is that while it is a relatively straightforward deck overall in terms of the playstyle, you're generally just kind of trying to play out the best thing each turn that you can. One thing that I did realize is you need to be very specific with the mulligan. Don't just keep cards that are good enough here. Make sure you're looking for the really good cards overall. And I think even having said that, I really like that che0nsu held onto the Fairy Dragon because it is just such a perfect counter to this one drop.
It really is. Can't be targeted by that hero power. And the great thing for che0nsu is that because he top decked Corrosive Breath, he didn't have to hesitate about pointing out Fairy Dragon. He would still have a play for this turn. But a Fairy Dragon on the other side means that che0nsu can't just breath it away. I wouldn't mind him just holding it for now, but I really like taking the value trade. It seems to be very good against anything che0nsu develops, except exactly Desert.
And even then, it's only the difference if your opponent has a 1-1, whereas they wouldn't have had it before. So I think I'll take the value trade, given there's a good chance they don't have it, having full mulligan.
And che0nsu could use a spear of his own, but I'm liking the look of Zixor just to get a value trade and put it on board, try to get the Death Rattle into the deck as soon as possible, because that seems like a huge swing.
I'm not necessarily quite so convinced. I'm seeing in hand Desert Spear and Varanus on curve. And obviously, it looks like at the moment you will have a turn 5 ready to equip the spear thereafter. But there's a lot of those mid-gamey cards that might make it so you don't have time to equip the spear.
Bring up a fair point. Something like Rotnest Drake, or especially Faceless Corruptor. That's a big one. If you have the spear equipped already, that is double benefit because you have your turn 5 already accounted for, and you get to transform that minion. But I ultimately do like che0nsu just playing to what he can see in hand. I think this makes for a very powerful card.
That's very fair. Just having a 2-1 board, and even as you said, it's a minor benefit, but having the 8/8s in, oh sorry, the 4/4s in the deck in Zixor Prime is a very big deal indeed.
See, che0nsu's probably first opportunity for a bit of deviation here. The natural play is just to go for Evasive Daywing, call it a day, but the Bone Wraith will definitely get a value trade onto the Zixor there. We could see che0nsu potentially go for tracking to find something to pair with Corrosive Breath. The mana didn't work out all that great with Desert Spear. It's just gonna go for that.
Yeah, this feels nice and easy to me. It's a bit of a weirder turn on the other side for che0nsu, however, because You really don't want to be transforming this death rat, or sorry, this reborn effect away, given how much disruption it's causing for che0nsu, but everything else just doesn't trade very well with the evasive Feywing.
He could develop his own and say that it's probably going to be protected by the Bone Wraith 2 halves. With that argument, do you ever even play just the Dragon Bane? That seems like a minion that is very good to have under protection.
It's a fair point. It's a very fair point. I guess his thinking is that he can just go for that on turn 6 and there's no need to take a risk at all.
True. I mean, the curves for both these players are looking pretty powerful as Surrender has already drawn his 6-star right off the top after being shuffled in.
Yeah, this curve is starting to look insane. He even finds the time to equip the Desert Spear on turn 5, so Surrender has managed to find a way to have his cake and eat it as well. Varanus ready to come down on turn 6 with the Desert Spear is such a crucial swing turn in this matchup. Look at this.
But che0nsu has the chance to snipe, make it a 2 and 3 for good targets, and he gets the best one, I think. I was considering, do you ever trade the Feywing into the 1-1 just to remove the worst possible target? But che0nsu says no. Surrender. It's just a question of whether he wants to face tank this 3 damage in order to preserve a 1-1 on board. The upside of having an additional minion is playing around Rotnest Drake, of course.
The downside is that you have taken extra damage and they might go Dino Tamer Bran on the next turn, at which point you are looking resoundingly dead.
Especially and since Surrender at the moment doesn't even have a play for turn 7.
Yeah. I think I just really like preserving the health total here. Like you said, Rotnest Drake is really scary, but just taking the damage from Dino Tamer Bran ends the game on the spot.
For che0nsu, he has a few concerns for counter-lethal. There's also a possibility for Siamat trade here, but I think it is very specific combinations of cards that Surrender needs to have to be able to produce 11 burst from hand. I'm thinking Zephyrus Wind Fury plus Kill Command? Does that even fit?
I mean, I think it's Siamat anyway, just because it's such a good value trade, and then you can go for the Dino Tamer Bran next turn.
Alright. Does make it quite difficult for Surrender to...
We're of course looking for Rotnest Drake here, I think is the best possible option for Surrender. And
available though.
Snake Trap is there to bluff the Freezing Trap. Is that something that che0nsu will ever play around here, Gia?
I think that because he's got an attacking Siamat and a Dino Tamer Bran, I mean, it feels painful to have your Siamat be returned to hand. But if you get a King Crush face, I think it is no sweat off che0nsu's back at all. It might just be Scale Rider to play that alongside the Stormhammer and try to push face. I don't think the Felmaw is ever going off here. The game will be done before 2 turns are up. If you go Snake Trap, you can still just play the Blazing Battle Mage alongside that and the Stormhammer. I think it is Surrender's best shot.
Going nice and wide here, and I guess hoping his opponent slips up and he can draw Zephyrus or Dino Tamer in order to try and hit lethal in the next couple of turns.
Yeah. Wide makes a lot of sense here if he's expecting another big push from che0nsu. So che0nsu 3 off lethal, but he's got to worry about Surrender's lethal as said.
Right.
8 from hand possibilities. There's many combinations of cards. Stormhammer, Kill Command. There is Zephyrus just for Savage Roar.
Yep, Zephyrus on its own is GG.
So it looks like we're going to see che0nsu actually go for Faceless Corruptor here and Snake Trap as well, which I think is very fine because he gets to push the 6 to face and still end up threatening lethal with the Bran.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I was considering if you just still go for Dino Tamer Bran and trade Siamat as well, but this means that you're getting the damage face with Siamat this turn, and you still have the backup of Dino Tamer Bran next turn. I like this a lot.
Yeah, and the hero power as well makes it so that even if this board gets cleared, yeah, this is much better than Thing Trap. It is just Ran hero power for lethal.
Yeah.
You can see Surrender can clear the board if he wants with 4.
Yeah, or with the CM multiple ways that this can be done, but none of them are winning lines.
Very heads up from che0nsu there, and it is going to be the classic King Crush to face for lethal. Goes up 1-0 with a deck that is not the highest spring rate. I think that's going to be a bit of a downer for Surrender. Gotta potentially run up his Demon Hunter. Sorry, his Hunter into che0nsu's Demon Hunter.
Yeah, very, very important win there for che0nsu. Not only, of course, in terms of having a chance to take the series, but just in terms of what the series means to him overall. As you can see there at 0-3, this is his chance to turn things around against one of the best that Asia Pacific has to offer. And it really was just a case for me of that brilliant sequencing in the last few turns. Dino Tamer Brown was so tempting on every single one of those turns on 7 and 8, but he just managed to play around it, not fall into that trap. And despite Surrender's best efforts, it was just a very clean game overall.
Yeah, I think very well recognized from che0nsu that he doesn't need to go for the big pressure immediately, as long as he takes these incremental face damage. It's not even incremental, it's a Tiamat going face twice or so, and then just making sure he never loses hold of the board. It makes it so that Surrender's potential Zephyrus out can only deal with a board. It can't swing, potentially, if Surrender had gotten, say, just the lethal from his own minions.
Yeah, just very, very clean Highlander Hunter gameplay overall. And for the rest of this series, with che0nsu up 1-0, we're going to have to go to a quick break before we come back with hopefully the slightly longer this time conclusion to this series between che0nsu and Surrender. You're watching Hearthstone Grandmasters here on Hearthstone Esports YouTube channel. Remember to subscribe if you are enjoying the content that we are putting out for you here in Hearthstone Grandmasters. We've got a lot more to come as this is only week 6, still 3 more exciting weeks of action here in Season 1. And speaking of exciting action, Gia, Druid Mirror, does anything create a more visceral reaction of pure joy in your heart than the phrase spell Druid Mirror?
That whole sentence seemed like a perfect tee up, except for the word joy. I feel like you could have chosen many other words to take that spot, and it would have indeed been a very visceral reaction. But I will say that this is something that we're probably going to expect to see quite a lot throughout this weekend because Druid is at such a very high bring rate for APAC. That's me calling a prediction already. It's going to have a high win rate as well. I mean, based on the win rates from our graphic, we've been seeing it beat Demon Hunter. We've been seeing it beat just decks that we did not expect it to perform so well against. And I wonder if people expected others to be bringing so much Druid, are we going to be seeing some tech here? So far, no Starfalls in sight.
Yeah, I was actually going to talk to you about that because my first thought was if you expect a lot of Druid, bring a Starfall because it's fantastic against the early Glowfly Swarm boards and gives you a comeback. But then having thought about it a step further, is that actually a good tech specifically for the Mirror? Do you want to just not even worry about that and instead just go all in on trying to focus on your own game plan rather than even considering being reactive?
You know, it is really tough to say because we keep praising the Japanese players for their very proactive approach to the game plan, but I think that particularly Starfall can shut down the primary way that your opponent wins in the Mirror, which is just play. And they're not able to immediately buff it if they play it early. So the Starfall can shut off a lot of early resources invested into it that I feel it is still a card that would ultimately be beneficial in this matchup. Maybe have the side benefit of helping out in the Demon Hunter match.
Well, for the moment at least, Gia, we have to live in the real world, unfortunately, where that is not the case for either of these two players. And just to break down, because we have been talking about the Glowfly Swarms, the Starfalls, what is the cornerstone of this matchup, which we are going to be seeing a lot over the weekend?
It is the Glowfly Swarm. You said it right there. I mean, just the nature of the decks is that whoever gets on board first, if they go for more than 4 minions, it is just so difficult for the opposing Druid to clear them out without using their own spells, which then just gets rid of their own win condition, which is Glowfly or Mount Seller.
It really, really is, which is why at first glance it looks like che0nsu is in a fantastic position by getting down the turn 3 Glowfly Swarm. Even missing the Fungal Fortunes is not all too much of a deterrent, but I will say that this size of a board is not instantly game-winning.
You're right. Surrender has options to deal with quite a few of them. If he wants to, he can clear 3 of them. I think it is 1 mana short of being able to clear 4. So I feel that he will be using Crystal Power for sure to remove 1. The Fog Beam is a little bit too expensive for what is getting done here. The only question I think is whether he wants to cycle Wrath for another draw but 1 less minion cleared, which also saves him a Moonfire. But maybe the draw is not so much a priority because he could just go Innervate Overflow.
Yeah, that's what I was definitely also looking at as well. I mean, he still has that possibility. He's still dumping a lot of cards on this.
Yeah, the fact that he is dumping so much makes him want to cycle the Wrath. Oh, che0nsu could go for a Rising Winds for development plus Iron Bark to trade.
True.
I wonder.
There's also potential for just double minions, trade your 2/2 as is. You still end up with 4 minions on board. Pretty sturdy given how much removal Surrender is already expended, and then try to buff everything with Power of the Wild on the following.
Yeah, there's also the potential for Rising Winds plus Crystal Power to kill off the minion, and then next turn Rising Winds plus Power of the Wild, which I know is very mana inefficient, but it does give you the maximum buffage on as many minions as possible.
Yes, that's true. It also pushes a little bit of extra damage this
True.
turn.
Or is there just the immediate buff game plan?
A bunch of 3/3s and okay.
Wow.
This is very all in on few minions, I would say. But if we're thinking about what Surrender could do on the next turn, it is pretty limited, right? You must be expecting Fate Overflow because you wouldn't expend so many cards going into a Fate Mount Seller turn.
Yeah, this does also set up exact lethal on the following turn if there's no overflow or no hero power.
Right.
And I agree you could definitely make the read that your opponent is fairly likely to go Innovate Overflow, but if you were just to see from them Glowfly, now that they've cleared the board, he may also have the read that Surrender is trying to set that up now that he's cleared the board. This does just win against that.
It's true.
I wonder.
Yeah, going for any type of development now and base damage, I think still would have set up for lethal on the next turn with Power of the Wild Savage Roar, but
Yeah.
going for the buffs now, I suppose, makes it more awkward for Surrender.
Time waits for
Simply
no one.
Crystal Power any one minion. Now he needs to commit Wrath and Fog before the 7th.
And after much deliberation, I can definitely agree that this hand is begging for an overflow. As soon as Mount Seller is found,
Ooh.
double Bog Beam at 0 mana next turn, and he's not dead here. This could be a potentially very strong swing back for Surrender, and it all hinges on next turn.
It really does. And I'm already seeing the potential for 2 of these minions to be cleared by the Mount Seller Pugmies. But what's important is that we don't see an Iron Bark yet for Surrender. So we're going to see che0nsu just develop the most he can and heal back up his Glowfly. I think this is exactly what his hand calls for. It is simply a matter of whether Surrender can generate more defensive minions with the Exotic Mount. Say a little prayer, does Surrender.
It's really just going to come down to can those rushes or taunts come into play.
He's got 4 shots at generating those. No additional way to draw into Iron Bark. That's the crucial thing here. He's starting with the non-Bog Beam spell because he is not sure where he's going to aim the Bog Beams yet. In theory, you'd probably want to remove more minions instead of one tall minion because Druid's payoff spells rely more on quantity than quality. But there's also the possibility of driving Griffin. Oh, the stress.
Time waits for no one.
I mean, he needs Griffins here, right? Or taunts.
Yep. I mean, even Griffin alone doesn't do it anymore. He just needs the taunts. And he knows it.
Oh.
Brutally.
No.
Brutally close.
For Surrender. But we could have very well seen the turning point there if it were just 1 or 2 taunts or Griffins.
Yeah, I know. It's heartbreaking to see. But I think the main thing to focus on here is that weird turn from che0nsu, that turn 4, where we explored like 5 different possible lines, all of which had their merit. We're talking full development, we're talking immediate buff, playing the Iron Bucks, take a value trade, playing the Crystal Power to preserve one of your minions. And che0nsu goes with, I think, the one line that we didn't look at, which had the dual benefit of forcing the overflow from his hand, because Surrender is going to be doing the maths and figuring out that is exact lethal with Savage Roar, which I think gives him a very good read of it being in hand. And at that point, I think it just meant that che0nsu was saying, even if you do have the overflow, I then have such a strong board presence that there's nothing you can do to even stop me from winning the game next turn.
Yeah. I think that the immediate use of Iron Bark is the one that I really didn't expect, but it turned out to be so awkward for Surrender to deal with. Kind of flash of brilliance from che0nsu there because we saw he didn't even take the trade. He knew that because he had the taunt, he had the license to take the free damage. And then eventually, after Surrender did the trade himself, he was able to heal that minion back up. So no detriment to che0nsu at all. Very clean. And probably not the way I expect a druid mirror to go most often. So that is always a welcome sight.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I'm sure even che0nsu isn't certain that he took the right line because it's just so complicated and there's so many things to consider all in all. But for the third time in a row now, Chia, in this series, we are getting another mirror. We've had the Hunter, we've had the Druid, and now we're on to the Demon Hunter, for which I'm already seeing what I would argue are two cards that are exactly teched in for the mirror for che0nsu.
Yeah, Worgen Infiltrator, not something you see very often, but it can just get down on board immediately and not die to hero power. So che0nsu has the license of where he wants to trade that, and it could be very annoying for Surrender to deal with later on. But it is just so funny how they seem to have the same brain, Derek. They're queuing the same classes. Well, obviously, Surrender knew that che0nsu had to queue up Demon Hunter at this point.
Hey, I got you,
But
friend.
prior to that,
Very sad, but arguably necessary. Beaming sidekick coming down there for Surrender. Ooh,
Only
this
had
is
an
a slightly
imaginary
tougher choice,
friend.
though.
yeah, very tough because, of course, you want to go for max development with Umberwing, but
Yeah.
potentially locks in the Spectral Sight for a non-outcast later. We have to ask, what does Surrender expect che0nsu to be doing on the next turn? Coin into Frozen Shadow Weaver is very backbreaking, especially if he's not developing additional
True.
minions this turn.
I grow impatient.
I guess with the fact, if you factor in that he has a way to spend his mana this turn, and although it's not a great spend of the mana, he does still have Umberwing next turn for if he needs it. He's very likely to just draw into enough things to spend his mana on over the next few turns to curve into the Glavebound on 5.
Yeah, not ideal, but I think you're not
grow
supposed to be going for
impatient.
ideal in this matchup. It is all
Yep.
about the immediate, and the board is of utmost importance going into turn 5. For che0nsu, I'm still looking at... I was going to say Coin Shadow Weaver, but the follow-up is really weak without a Twin Slice. I don't hate the look of just another Worgen in Hero.
Yeah, that looks fine to me. You're keeping the board clear. It doesn't feel like it's quite the crucial Shadow Weaver turn quite yet, because even if they do go for a Satyr Overseer here, you of course have the ability to kill it off very cleanly.
Surrender can free up the Spectral Sight now. It is costly using Twin Slices, but the alternative is to just go face and play another Umberwing. You lose a charge, but honestly, it doesn't sound so bad with this board state. Having a bunch of 1/1s is exactly what che0nsu doesn't want to see.
Precisely. The argument for the Twin Slice is, of course, that you have the Umberwing, and therefore you don't need it to activate your Glavebound on turn 5, which of course makes the power of the Twin Slice a bit less necessary overall. But then you're not developing two 1/1s, and I think Surrender again comes to the correct conclusion of let's just develop the tempo on board.
I like this a lot.
Such a weird game. I haven't seen a Demon Hunter mirror with the Worgen Infiltrators before. It completely changes the texture of the matchup.
Yeah, texture is a great word for this. So we could see Satyr Overseer coin hero power. It is the biggest swing on the board, and he still got Kayn for next turn.
Mm-hmm.
And he could also, say, remove a sidekick with the Worgen Infiltrator, because he would be developing an additional 4 health on the board, and from what he can see, that would put Surrender on 3 attack.
Hide behind your circles.
Or
Instead he's...
we could just smork!
Yeah, going the other way round. Unstealth
Alright.
the Worgens here. What?
Wow. Bold.
Here I was thinking that he was fighting for tempo and board control in the early game, and all of a sudden he just launches everything to the dome.
I don't know. Maybe che0nsu said, if you're not going to give me any good minions, let me just cash in this damage now. But it is going to be absolutely disastrous for him now. Surrender can easily clean up this board, still maintain a 1-2, and
Oh.
even gets the Sigil Runner down to 1 attack, but
Still drawing a card.
probably still liking the hero power here. I think that he gets to maintain the same amount of board. He still has a Umberwing charge for the Glavebound next turn. Could potentially milk more value out of this.
Okay, yeah, I agree. Just because his turn 5 is the best it can possibly be in the deck already with Swing and Glavebound. And it has worked out, like you said, disastrously for che0nsu. It does make you question his thought process. What was he expecting to happen there overall?
Cold in the shadows.
Job done.
I couldn't tell you.
Yeah. The benefit, of course, is saving the Frozen Shadow Weaver for turn 5, which again, we've talked about it. Turn 3 and turn 5 feel like the turns to save the Frozen Shadow Weaver for.
Oh, look at this top deck from Surrender. It perfectly trades the Shadow Weaver,
Yeah, that's
opens up
insane.
the Sigil Runner, but does he even want to trade here? I think it looks pretty fine.
He's got the I-Beam now, though. I think Surrender might have the liberty to just start going face. Next turn, Glavebound I-Beam. He's winning board. He's swinging back his health total.
That's if you think the card off the top is cheap enough.
Oh, sorry.
Exactly,
Yeah,
Twin
yeah.
Slice.
No, sorry, fair point. But even just the Glavebound and the I-Beam eventually
Okay.
will be able to heal him back up.
Yeah, the Glavebound is a very good point. But I'm just thinking, if che0nsu can go face with this 4 damage and follow up with the 4 Glaives, that might be the way that Surrender loses. Because I think he's got a very solid grip on the board. Oh.
All of a sudden, both players just going with a face race, ignoring the other's board control almost completely.
Gonna see che0nsu try and take the board back though, because the 4 Glaives did line up very awkwardly into what Surrender had to offer. You're either overcommitting damage or taking too much. Oh my.
Well, there
Could
is...
see the War Glaives plus I-Beam now.
Oh.
Isn't it good? He clear can I-Beam down the remaining minion, and he has still additional charges plus Glavebound set up for next turn.
Yeah, I guess the I-Beam does offset some of the damage quite a lot.
But I would like to see Surrender not clear everything with his face. I think that the Kayn could potentially just clear off, say, the Satyr Overseer here.
Mm-hmm. It's really just unlocking the I-Beam. It's so insane. Whew.
He's taking all the damage here. Haven't done the math yet. If this still sets up 2-turn lethal, then I am on board. I don't think it does.
Not quite. Yeah. Again, maybe just saying it's unlikely, unless he has Metamorphosis in hand, that che0nsu can set up 2-turn lethal in response.
That's true. Very good.
And it does, of course, mean at 5 health instead of 3, that Warglaives can't clear off the Kayn in one hit. So many things still to consider. It's such a dense matchup.
So the Warglaives allows che0nsu to push 6 over 2 turns, potentially 8 with the hero power. And I think that gives him a top deck Metamorphosis for lethal, but not Glavebound. So it is a very specific draw that che0nsu would have to get immediately after Warglaives right now to set up lethal. So I think he's coming to the right conclusion that he needs something more miraculous off of the spell.
Twin Slice is, in a way, a pretty fantastic top deck, just to allow him to get the Frenzied Fellwing on board. If for nothing more than a distraction for Surrender.
Wait a second, though. The Altruist... Was he supposed to save it, then? This is a lot of resources committed now. This is a lot less cut and dry than the other time that we saw che0nsu play a lot of cheap spells from Skull, despite having an Altruist in
Yeah.
hand. But I think it is definitely worth looking back on. But for Surrender now, again, just a little bit short of health and health, and the Fell Wing make it awkward for him to deal with.
Yeah.
Unless he wants to just Glaive Bound.
I do think I like this line from che0nsu as well, because Altruist is very, very tempting, but it relied very, very heavily on what came off the top. And if all of a sudden a 5-drop comes down, the entire game plan falls apart and you're just dead at that point.
So this will probably merit the Glaive Bound charge from Surrender. And I guess that is exactly what che0nsu wanted to accomplish.
Grows short.
Hey!
And
What
he
are
can
his
then-
outs for counter? Oh! So we can get 4 procs of Altruist?
4 procs of Altruist,
Not enough to deal with the Glaive
It's not-
Bound.
not enough for lethal either. I don't think that gets there.
No, it really doesn't. Because he can't kill the Glaive Bound without having to swing into it. And that is just GG. Teetering on a knife's edge yet again is the Demon Hunter mirror.
Such a weird one as well. I don't think I've ever seen a Demon Hunter mirror quite like that, where obviously the Worgen Infiltrators introduced another metric that we haven't really had to consider before in this mirror, but just going face when there were so many 1-1s on the opponent's side of the board. Of course, maybe he's afraid of Altruist cleaning up his board, which would be absolutely devastating. Maybe he's just thinking, my opponent's never going to play into it, but it really just didn't work out for him in the end at all.
Yeah. I mean, I haven't played with the Worgen Infiltrators in my Demon Hunter list, I'll admit that.
Yeah.
Not enough experience in it, but I do feel that the main purpose for them in the deck is to be able to disincentivize your opponent from playing their very strong on-curve cards like
Yeah.
Satyr Overseer. And the longer that che0nsu keeps them, the more he forces Surrender to kind of deviate from his ideal plan. It just happened that Surrender's hand that he drew, which is normally awkward, the double Umber Wings, was perfectly aligned with what che0nsu had, and maybe a little bit more patience from che0nsu could have turned that matchup a different way.
Yeah, there were just, again, so many other things to consider. It's using the coin on turn 3 for the cane, whereas it could have been saved for the skull, but that would have meant his turn there was very, very weak. Should he have started trading with the cane in order to try and continue locking down the board? I'm not going to try and analyze it too heavily, because you can just get lost in the mud in those matchups, just going over and over the same things again. But it was very, very cool to see a slightly different build of the Demon Hunter, which we are going to see yet again now up against either Surrender's Hunter or Druid.
Yes, indeed. I mean, it kind of makes me wonder what has che0nsu cut to make room for all of this, but again, it is just the Crimson Sigil Runner, the card that got nerfed, but Surrender still has put his faith into it, and it did really come in clutch for that one turn where he paired it with Kayn, I believe.
It did, yeah. It was just a decent card to throw down, and I think that's still how people feel about Crimson Sigil Runner. It's not bad; you can run it, but you have to have a little bit more of a deliberate reason for it. I think we're seeing one of the players this week, it might be Flurry even, going for a Questing Adventurer build of Demon Hunter, in which that makes a little bit more sense. Draw through to your cheaper cards, so you can start popping off with that more consistently. But still, back to che0nsu's build for the moment on the slightly more anti-mirror version of Demon Hunter. Will it be able to stack up against the Highlander Hunter from Surrender? In testing, at least, Gia, I've got to be honest, I felt that the Demon Hunter was in a pretty good spot at just locking down the board early on, which is the most important part of this matchup.
Yeah, I completely agree. Even before the rounds of nerfs and after, Demon Hunter just feels like it is far too efficient in the early game for Highlander Hunter to deal with. Their MO for Hunter is just play one card at a time, hope that it is well statted enough to survive against the board, but Demon Hunter is just far too efficient at dealing with those types of threats. Looking at the secret package for Surrender, there's a freezing trap and a snake trap. No explosive, which is an upside for che0nsu, I'd say, but the snake is potentially very annoying.
Yeah, I mean, this whole thing is just annoying for che0nsu.
Not having gotten one of the higher attack 1-drop makes a huge difference here. That's another place where you can feel the Crimson Sigil Runner nerf coming into play. It's just another shot at being able to put 2 damage onto the board on turn 1.
This is a pretty cool play from che0nsu that at first glance I really didn't like the look of, but having taken a closer glance here, the fact that Surrender is going into turn 3 specifically as Highlander Hunter, and he allows the Phase Stalker to stay alive. If you look at Highlander Hunter overall, it's nearly all 3-drops, because there are just so many good 3-drops for Hunter at the moment. And if you're denying one of those by letting him hero power, fine. That's just not that bad.
I like it a lot, even without the factor of denial that you put in. And he gets the bad secret. Oh, man. I think we could have told that from Surrender's facial expression. But also, for che0nsu, if you wanted to kill the Phase Stalker, it would involve coining hero power, which is just far too expensive, I would say. I think maintaining the 1-drops on board is just annoying enough as it is for the hunter to deal with. It gets rewarded because it was just a 50-50 from his perspective.
Yeah. But it is pretty disastrous because, again, as I mentioned, it is about locking down the board early on in order to clinch this matchup.
You also see that Surrender's list has Frozen Shadow Weaver, which I think is in some Highlander Hunter list.
che0nsu here as well with the opportunity to kill off the Phase Stalker to deny the second secret. Instead just plows face in order to get down the Frenzied Fellwing. There's the upside right there, obviously, in order to get the extra 3-2 down. Is this indicating that he's just not going to trade into a minion for the rest of the game, Gia?
Possibly. Or when he does trade, maybe he's thinking that he's got this Altruist to possibly clean up the snake should they come down. But again, if Surrender wants to hero power on this turn, very few cards that he can actually pair with that. Yeah. We can see one of them, though. Corrosive Breath available for Surrender here. Or as I can see, it does look stronger than just going for Dragonbane on curve, which gets cleared up pretty easily.
Quickly.
Snake's Corrosive Breath value trade. Or he could trade this down and hope the Dragonbane stick.
Or, third line, get down the Desert Spear to set up for the Faceless Corruptor on the following turn. And thereafter, the Varanus as well. This is, I think, one of the few points that we've been talking about in Demon Hunter where you deviate, or sorry, with Highlander Hunter, where you deviate from the expected line for bigger rewards later on. However, Gia, the punish is here.
Yeah. I mean, there are 2 copies of Shadow Weaver on the other side, which is the Giga Punish, but maybe Surrender's thinking that he was so far behind that he needed to hope that those cards weren't there in order to get a powerful enough swing to actually take the game. But from this point on, it's seeming much more difficult. He's got a decent play, though. He can draw his Zixor from this Ingenuity and trade down
I wonder.
Frozen Shadow Weaver.
Yeah, he has a couple of ways he can do this, actually. Like you said, the Zixor was the first thing I was looking at on this turn, but Diving Griffin into Corrosive Breath is also not bad. I guess whether or not you summon Zixor Prime as 4/4s or 8/8s doesn't really matter all too much in this matchup, I think. Or 6/6s, sorry. Yes, sorry, yeah.
It is just difficult because will he even have the time to draw the 6/6s with the Scavengers and Ingenuity?
Possibly not.
Because for that to happen, he's got to play the original Zixor, have it die, and then play the Scavenger's Ingenuity.
Sure. It really does just put into perspective how powerful of a card Scavenger's Ingenuity was when it's still just good. At -1, -1. This is still a powerful turn he just had.
But for che0nsu, the turn is very close to just dead. I'm looking at Metamorphosis just to get the mana expenditure out of the way, but we could Tempo Altruist. Why not?
Tempo Altruist, Gia.
Yeah. This is to free up the skull. No other reason.
I mean, sure, but tempo outro. You never see the tempo outro.
Yeah, you never do. But che0nsu's other options were 5
Whoa.
mana do nothing with the Metamorphosis or 3 mana 1/1. And this play
Yikes.
puts more stats on board and clears up the Metamorphosis. Feels bad, but I think he had to do it.
Feels awful.
Yep.
And Surrender has quite a few different ways to answer this board. Varanus is looking fairly tempting to me. You have a extremely good read that they don't have a Glavebound Adept in hand. So that's one of the biggest punishes to that with a trade.
There's also the option of going a little bit off curve again. Diving Griffin, Corrosive Breath, draws him the Zixor, and has it locked and loaded for the following turn. But I feel that just going for it in the order you suggested makes a lot more sense, because the turn 7 will just cleanly be Griffin, Corrosive, and possibly the Dormant.
Amazing. I wonder what kind of a read Surrender has on his opponent's hand, because if he had any cheap minions at all, he would surely throw them down with the Altruist. Obviously, he knows that one of them is a Fellwing, so does he must just have the read on a skull trapped in the middle, because I can't think of any other reason why you would play it over something else.
True. Yeah, I think that is true. And if you're expecting skull, then this is a good time to play the Varanus, because even a Glavebound off the top wouldn't be cheap enough to play from skull. But che0nsu is going to deviate a little bit here. 7 attack on this is far too threatening. Or rather, it's all going face? Alright. I never know what's going on in this man's mind.
The most insanely aggressive player with Demon Hunter that I have ever seen.
Okay.
You could not pay this man to not hit face.
Is this insane, though? I mean, he hasn't in hand. He doesn't have the 2-turn lethal setup, but he could draw things from Skull. But for Surrender, he could simply clear up this board with the Desert Spear, play his Dragonbane, and set up for his own 2-turn lethal.
What if he just gets Brand here? Like, I feel like che0nsu's game plan here wasn't actually that consistent at all. There are so many punishes to this line. Siamat for Divine Shield Wind Fury is insane here. Like, Dino Tamer Brand is insane. I'm not sure he's winning this race the majority of the time at all.
I have to agree with you. I'm a bit lost as to what he was thinking he could draw off the top here, even with Chaos Strike. Not enough.
Right, Glavebound Adept is too expensive. Kayn doesn't get over the line. It has to be an incredibly specific hand with like double Twin Slice or something absurd like that.
And Surrender has set up the counter lethal, whether it would have been with Dragonbane or Faceless Corruptor is probably more consistent with these, because the Dragonbane could have just gotten pinged off with the Metamorphosis. I think between Corrosive Breath, Dragonbane, and Hero Power, I think Surrender has the guaranteed lethal.
Yeah. I mean, he does.
Time grows short.
What is going on with che0nsu?
Something
I was
weird
willing
here,
to give him the benefit of the doubt on the Worgen Infiltrator turn from last game, because we simply haven't played enough of that card.
But here, any development at all from Surrender meant that he had counter lethal and che0nsu was left with nothing.
Especially knowing that his next turn was going to be very slow, just Skull.
Yep.
I think if you know you're going for a Skull lethal, you're meant to clear off some pressure, make sure you can survive the Skull turn itself, and then go for the big push. But that does just mean Surrender has evened it up now, 2-2. With the Hunter out of the way, he still got a tough matchup with Druid versus Demon Hunter remaining.
Yeah, I was left a little bit perplexed there at the end, but of course, congratulations to Surrender. I think he played that very, very well overall, with the crucial turn, of course, being that deviation away on turn 4 from the play, of the Dragon's Bane, instead to go for the Desert Spear instead, which even though the punish was there, with the freeze in order to stop him from going with the attack on the following turn, it was still just a very strong play. It set up for Varanus on 6, which swung the board so drastically in his favor. And overall, I think that was a very good spot, as we've been talking about, to deviate from the expected line, which is something that Surrender is always going to be spotting with his pet deck of Highlander Hunter.
That's right. I think the other decision point where we saw him hesitate the longest was the order about which he wanted to go for the draw rush effect, whether it's Scavenger's Ingenuity first and then Diving Griffin, or the other way around. But he ended up going for the Ingenuity on the first half of Zixor, which I think makes a lot of sense. You're going for just surviving in the mid game, probably not even going to get to the time where you play the Zixor Prime.
Yeah.
So his play allowed him to maintain some board presence rather than just trading off a Griffin 1-for-1.
Gia, despite being at a 2-0 lead over Surrender, still arguably the strongest player that we have here in Asia Pacific, che0nsu is one game away from the reverse sweep and going down to 0-4 to join Kin right down at the bottom of Division A.
It's really for me to see, honestly, because these losses, at least from today, I think it's fair to say, and a few games from before, were due to completely preventable things from che0nsu. The other one was from the rope. And this, I feel, just considering any development, as you said, from Surrender as Hunter, I really do hope he gets it together. But Surrender now, on the Druid, if you're in APAC, it appears that Druid is favored versus Demon Hunter.
And I think if you are in APAC and a Japanese player, you are getting rid of that Wrath every single day of the week. Even though it's been drilled into our heads that against Demon Hunter, you keep removal, you keep removal. It's what you need to do in the early game, is just get rid of their early threats. We see Surrender full mulligan for, of course, the Overgrowth, Wild Growth, and arguably most importantly, the Fungal Fortunes.
Oh yes, I think he has adopted the ways of the Japanese players. Hasn't paid off for him quite yet, but there's still chances to top deck into that Fungal Fortunes. Willpower's not too bad. It allows him to at least remove the Battle Mage. Then he could go for the Coin Overgrowth.
It does just mean that he's running lower and lower on terms of actual number of spells to summon with the Glowfly.
The fires of vengeance burn bright.
I think on average he'll still end up with 5-6, which is decent. It's enough to swing board versus Demon Hunter.
Yeah. Interesting deviation there from che0nsu to go with Sata Overseer. I suppose it makes sense to go for Satan next turn, because if you're expecting one of the two plays of Coin Overgrowth or Coin Glowfly, I think Coin Glowfly is more likely to come down, to be honest, in order to try and preserve spells, and therefore going for the Sata Overseer, playing it on the turn where they're less likely to react to it, does make sense.
From Surrender, we could already see a deviation. He doesn't have to Coin Overgrowth because he will still be able to play Glowfly next turn if he just saves coin. So you could see him, say, develop the Rising Winds just for a minion. Yes. Again, just a distraction for che0nsu, but all he needs to do is survive as long as possible. Or just draw, okay.
Just trying to juice up that Glowfly as much as he possibly can. But he is just being met with the most possible development, Gia, in these early turns, against which he has no answer.
All the 1-drops available for che0nsu into the most threatening 3-drop. I think we're just looking at
He's
Ito
dead.
with the cane.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He is literally just dead.
Oh my gosh.
No board space issues. You don't need to worry about that. Kane, GG. che0nsu, at the final hurdle, is able to get his first win of the round robin here in Grandmasters. And that actually means that him and Surrender are at the same score after Surrender's insane run through the Swiss. He's down to 1-3, right near the bottom of Division A.
That is shocking to me. I don't think I've seen anything from Surrender's lineup preparation or his play that I could particularly pick on. Just been bad beats so far, whereas congratulations to che0nsu, of course. It's great to see him get a win onto the board, but I wonder about the quality of the play that led up to this point.
Yeah, I think there were definitely a couple of blips along the way with his Demon Hunter. At the end there, though, that was pretty much undisputable. That was just the correct way to approach the matchup there by going as aggressively as you humanly can onto the board. Again, from Surrender's side, while I was saying that here in Asia Pacific, the metagame has been to mulligan away Wrath, all your removal cards to look purely for the your own proactive game plan, maybe you are supposed to keep Wrath, and players have been getting a bit too greedy. Oh, am I just
say
wrong?
no, Dara.
Okay.
Okay, che0nsu's out for lethal there was exactly Kayn plus hero power, I think.
Sure.
Just the Warglaives on 5 wouldn't have done it, and the Glaive Bound wouldn't have been active because he didn't have mana to hero power as well. So, if Surrender just survives that turn, suddenly he's playing Power of the Wild to get rid of everything. He's playing Iron Bark to taunt up and protect himself, and eventually hit healing later on. I think that is the way you're supposed to win this matchup. If you just remove every so often and then take one turn of a break from not playing your Glowflies, you're still losing incrementally to
Right, but my
Demon
point is,
Hunter's damage.
he still had the Glowfly, right? He had the power play available in the Glowfly. And I guess, it's still a card away from Innovate or the Fungal Fortunes in order to ramp it up as much as possible. But if you have the power card, maybe you can deviate slightly to keep some removal. Again, I'm just trying to find something that Surrender could have done better, but this is Surrender we're talking about here, Gia. It's difficult to find things for him to improve on.
But to be fair, this is the I've developed from watching other players
Fair
than
enough.
Surrender, because I think Surrender was a bit later onto the Druid train than, say, Glory, Possessi, and Alutemu, speaking of which we are going to be seeing Possessi up next.
I think we are indeed. Don't know if we can take a look at the schedule, but the main point there is, of course, congratulations to che0nsu getting his first win on the board and equalizing himself with Surrender. The South Korean players looking decent, still not quite so up at the top as they would like compared to the Japanese players, which we are going to see another perfect feud of right now with Possessi up against Rivius. Possessi is, of course, the weakest in terms of performance and win rate so far of the Japanese players here in the round robin, which I think is, in a way, expected, given that he is the newcomer here to Hearthstone Grandmasters, trying to cut his teeth and prove that he's got what it takes to be up with the rest of them here in Grandmasters. But having said that, I actually think Possessi has been one of the better players here in Grandmasters. He has been consistently playing at a very, very high level, with last week his blip of kind of missing lethal, missing a removal of lethal from his opponent and just letting Glory take a very easy win against him. Apart from that, he's been